Coming up, a Florida coach has used a word that Florida fans have been looking forward to hearing for quite some time, and former Georgia linebacker Roquan Smith sort of touches on a subject that Georgia fans would rather not have to deal with. But we'll talk about it all next, right here on SEC Country Live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. If you're wondering why I'm dressed like a hobo today,
well, it is an ugly shirt.
Thanks. The building that we're in, we have a beautiful studio. We have an incredibly nice studio. But it seems like we have issues with the building from time to time. I can't quite tell what's going on. We had an issue with the building, with the water and the electricity and the things like that. And then there was a water main break here in Atlanta where we do the show from every day. I don't really quite know what's going on, to be completely honest with you. But the building over here to my left is completely empty. So we may be a slightly stripped down version of SEC Country Live today, but I am glad you're here. Michael and Hannah, who help keep us on the air every single day. Our buddy Mark, who kind of helps us out behind the scenes as well. We are here shouldering the load for the entire SEC today.
I was going to say, the only thing you really need to know is that of the 1,000 people that probably work in these two buildings, we're the only people here. Yeah, we're the only 5 people in any building, so we definitely want to make sure you get the show.
The desk job folks will sneak out at a moment's notice, but for us, the show must go on. So we'll do that the way we always do here with our big news around the SEC. I will say the one thing I'm a little bit disappointed in, because we are a little stripped down today, we have fewer people working the show. We don't actually have the Butch Jones stuff with the Alabama gear.
Oh, man. Can't
but
wait.
We'll do that tomorrow on SEC Country Live. I'm looking forward to actually talking about that. For now, though, let's talk about the stuff we do have planned to discuss. We'll start with item number 1 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And I thought that our friends over at the Florida page for SECCountry.com had some kind of interesting stuff. Florida coaches sort of touching on a subject we addressed here in SEC Country Live yesterday, which is how does Florida get better on offense? And one of the things that you see Gators coaches talking a lot about and their sort of availability here as you move towards the start of spring practice for Florida is the idea that a lot of this is going to come from recruiting. Let me give you an example here from Florida tight ends coach Larry Scott, a name that if you're not a Florida fan you may recognize as the Tennessee Vols offensive coordinator from a year ago. What Larry Scott says about his new job at Florida, he says recruiting is the lifeblood of what we do. It's the lifeblood of building relationships. If you can build those relationships the right way through recruiting, you can coach them the right way, the hard way. Florida's always been synonymous with winning, and winning at an elite level. If you want to do that here, you've got to recruit at that level. I am not kidding you when I tell you this. To hear that series of sentences from Larry Scott, to see the word recruiting mentioned over and over and over again, for me, and y'all know I'm not a Florida fan, I don't make any bones about that, but I'm guessing for Florida fans, they're happy to have some coaches talking about recruiting again because Jim McElwain's staff did not talk about it or do it nearly enough.
Yeah, it's almost poetic hearing what Larry Scott has to say, and obviously, you know, listen, he mentions at an elite level. That's a word that, you know, sometimes we kick that word around. Recruiting at an elite level is hard. I mean, Florida recruited at a high level. Georgia recruited at an elite level this year. Alabama was somewhere in between. And so I think to have him talking about it, to have him talking about the different tiers and what is necessary to win, because Larry Scott's been around. He's seen other programs inside and out of the SEC. To have him talk about what he thinks is a big deal and why he thinks Dan Mullen will pull Florida back to where they're used to. And he talks about, you know, the name brand that is Florida and what, you know, what's expected down there at that program. I think it's got to be poetry to the Florida fans out there to start to hear this staff come off and talk about recruiting and getting back to what made them so good in the past 2 regimes under Meyer and under Spurrier.
But what about in the context, though, of better offensive play? Do you think Florida fans are going to listen to their own coaches who say, hey, we're going to get better offensively by being better at recruiting? Do you think that the Florida fans are going to say, therefore, we're willing to give you a little bit of grace as you rebuild this roster and recruit better? I mean, how much do Florida fans want to see this in the immediate? You know, the idea of, and I hate this for Florida fans, this notion of, well, you know, Dan Mullen turned Dak Prescott into the NFL Rookie of the Year, yeah. Spin some gold out of the yarn that's been given to him at Florida. I mean, how much do Florida fans want that? How much are they willing to just kind of, you know, be patient, let the recruiting process play itself out? It seems like we ask some version of that question with SEC teams all the time.
It's a balance, right? I mean, it's got to be a little bit of a balance. You don't, and we've mentioned it, and we've used all the, you know, the slogans. Got to beat who you're supposed to beat, and there's got to be a little, you know, you got to have the good product on the field. It's got to pass the eye test. We can say all that all we want to, but the fact is Florida fans have to be willing to look past what they see on the field this year if they really believe that Dan Mullen is the long-term answer, right? I mean, Dan Mullen, you can look and say, boy, in 3 years, when he recruits his players and gets them back into the top 5 recruiting, that's when they're going to turn the corner. But at some point before then, and we've mentioned this about Jeremy Pruitt too, it's got to start to look like a better product, specifically at the quarterback position.
I think that Christopher P. Shooter Smith has a really interesting comment. He says, BA and Mike, do you think with the recent outstanding coaching hires that the SEC recruiting is going to become harder for all the SEC teams, hashtag best conference? I think what P. Shooter brings up there is actually pretty interesting to think about because you've got Jeremy Pruitt talking nonstop about recruiting at Tennessee. Obviously, Kirby Smart never stops talking about that at Georgia. Dan Mullen at Florida. That's just 3 teams in the East, to say nothing of LSU and Auburn and Alabama, Texas A&M, all the programs out west are trying to recruit the highest level too. There's not enough recruits to go around. That's why recruiting is so important. There aren't enough elite players. I think that P. Shooter here is bringing up a really good point that somebody's not going to get what they want. Somebody who says, hey, recruiting is going to be our lifeblood, you know what? Somebody's not going to get the players they need here.
Listen, I feel like we've already lived this scenario, though. Back when I was in college, this was one of the talk. I mean, Nick Saban shows up, starts getting #1 classes. Listen, Tommy Tuberville didn't last much longer. Les Miles ended up, losing his job. Philip Fulmer, Mark Richt. I mean, the list goes on. The list goes on of guys that really had good football. I'll even go out there and say Houston Nutt at a place like Arkansas when really things were rolling back in 07, 08. There's been some good coaches that have passed through, and I feel like the coaches that stayed at the top and were able to recruit at a high level are the ones that lasted longer than the ones that didn't. So I think we've already seen a little bit of version of that, going back 10 years or so. We are definitely seeing a new cycle because of all the new coaches.
Diego Albaran has an interesting point. He says if Georgia still hasn't won a national championship, then the Gators still have some time. I don't know if that's a swipe at Georgia or something he means intentionally, but I think Diego's actually bringing up a pretty good point there that the pace at which Georgia moves in 2018, does it build on what it did in 2017? Or, given the fact that it's losing a lot of seniors from last year's team, does it kind of come back to pack a little bit? That's going to determine the patience level I think that Florida fans show with their own coaching staff. If Georgia builds on 2017, either duplicates it or takes it the next step, at that point in time, Dan Mullen's job, both in terms of having to win with recruits and sort of keep your own fans happy, at that point in time, that job does become a little tougher then.
Yeah, and to shift gears a little bit, and Cliff Nelson asked on the YouTube page, shouldn't we give Ed Orgeron the same 3 years as Dan Mullen? And here's what I have to say about that. Florida won 4 games last year. That's nothing LSU has done under Les Miles. Les Miles was removed as a national championship winning head coach. Jim McElwain was not that guy. To me, that's the difference. To me, LSU, Ed Orgeron was brought in to uphold a standard and to get LSU to the next level and to get them over that hump that Les Miles was at. Dan Mullen was brought in to clean up a mess that Jim McElwain left behind him. I mean, that's just the bottom line. So we look at 3 years under Dan Mullen and say, boy, he's going to take some time. It's different at LSU, in my opinion, because the talent is still at LSU, and Ed Orgeron has it on the field already.
But the one thing, though, that I do agree with about what Cliff said on the YouTube side of things is I think that the way that that LSU fans may turn on Orgeron quickly if things don't go well in 2018, I think the same thing could potentially happen for Florida fans turning on Mullen very quickly here too.
It's very true.
So this notion that the Florida program, fans who've seen 2 different coaches win national championships in really just the last sort of modern era alone, the idea that they're going to give a whole bunch of patience to Dan Mullen, I don't think that's true. I think LSU fans want to win. They expect Orgeron to do it quickly. I think Florida fans want to win. I do think they expect for Dan Mullen to also do that quickly. So you could see Mullen, even though he was a winning coach at Mississippi State, those wins happened in Stark Vegas. They didn't happen in Gainesville. Florida fans could absolutely turn on Mullen quickly if he doesn't do what these assistant coaches are saying they're going to do.
That's a good point, because as Ed Orgeron's already had the year, when you do look at Florida's schedule for the coming up year, I mean, listen, if they pull like LSU did last year and Florida goes to Mississippi State and loses by 30 points, you're going to hear Dan Mullen's name start to come up. If they lose to a team like Colorado State or Charleston Southern, like Ed Orgeron did in year 1 against Troy, then also you're going to hear Dan Mullen in that same conversation. So I guess that's a good point too, to look at it in a little bit of hindsight and say Ed Orgeron has already had a year. That he could have moved himself out of that hot seat conversation with the performance on the field last year. He didn't quite do enough to get himself out of that situation.
All right, a lot of folks talking about Butch Jones in the comment section. Jones seen at the Alabama Pro Day wearing the Alabama gear. That's a pretty interesting sign.
Yeah.
It's something we've talked about a lot.
Yeah.
I'm on the record as saying the people who mock this don't get what this is. Analyst is not a big deal. It's not like being an on-field coach. He was a head coach before. This is institutional memory that Saban's bringing into his program. I think it's a good move for Alabama. I understand where the jokes come from on this, but to me, this is Saban buying low, selling high. This is, flipping a house. This is whatever analogy you want to use here. I think this is an example of Saban's genius and not an example of Saban slipping.
I think when I remove the crimson from my blood and I look at it, it makes a ton of sense. It really does. And I've followed along with it, and I know that Nick Saban's got a plan for it, and I understand Butch Jones is going to bring a ton of the staff. But if I put the Alabama fan hat on and I look at it and say, boy, I got to be honest, it makes me a little bit nauseous to see him in the crimson.
I understand that.
It's like Jim McElwain suiting up in Georgia.
It would be very similar. You're right. You're right.
It's just hard to stomach for some people. And the national pundits, and you've heard, the Barrett Slees and the Chris Lowe's, boy, it's a good move. And I agree, it's a good move. But man, I just seen him in that Bama jacket. It hasn't done it for me yet. It's going to take some time for me to get over that hump.
Sean Dyson says, "Throw that shirt in the garbage, BA." So here's the thing, Sean. Like, I would normally not wear this shirt on SEC Country Live, but the air conditioning was not on when this show started. I had the big sweatshirt on because it was cold outside today in Atlanta. So I had to take the sweatshirt off, which does reveal the Gatorade T-shirt. By the way, officially licensed product from Dog Nation.
Little product drop there.
Yeah, my show in the morning. So normally I don't try to rub the Gatorade thing into the Florida fans' faces who watch our show, but thanks for noticing, I guess.
Yeah, I did. And listen, it is hot, and you guys know that, I've got a glisten usually at most times.
I actually sort of feel like the air conditioning has sort of kicked in since we started the show. Do y'all feel that or not? I feel like we're sort of getting, it's actually a little bit more comfortable, although none of you care anything about that whatsoever. You just want to talk about the SEC. So let's do that. And speaking of Georgia, let's do that with item number 2 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And speaking of my show, Dog Nation Daily, today I was lucky enough to have former Georgia linebacker, the reigning Butkus Award winner for 2017, Roquan Smith on the program. Now, Roquan was obviously a one-man gang at times for the Georgia defense. On a Dog's defense, it was pretty talented. He stood head and shoulders above the rest of that group. Well, a lot of Georgia fans are wondering now that Roquan's going on in the NFL as a early entrant junior. He's going to be probably a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. What's Georgia left with in the linebacker position? I asked Roquan Smith himself, do you see another potential Roquan Smith among the linebackers still left at UGA? Here is what Roquan had to say about that.
There's a lot of special guys back there right now. I'm looking for a lot of competition to be going on this upcoming spring because all those guys have great skill sets from Nate Trez. He's one of the leaders of the linebacker room. Then you have guys like Tate Crowder, Monty Rice, then, Jaden McBride. So it's a lot of guys there, man, that has a chance to definitely make some plays this upcoming year. So I'm definitely thinking it'll be a rotation or anything like that because all those guys have some special skill sets.
Well, Roquan. So listen, I love Roquan Smith to death. As a Georgia fan, I say that anyway. If it's everybody, it's nobody. You know what I'm saying? No. I think for some Georgia fans, the fact there's such a long list of names that he mentions as sort of his, the guy that's going to follow in his footsteps, Georgia, that sort of leads me to believe that maybe in Roquan's eyes, he doesn't see one guy, truly closest to distinguishing himself.
Yeah, I agree with you. If nobody has jumped out at you, and we've mentioned this, in terms of Bama players have talked about upcoming Bama players. Auburn players have talked about Smoke Monday and, all these guys that are up and coming. I kind of agree with you. But if you got to be Roquan by committee, then there's not one Roquan. You know what I mean? It's you kind of dip back into this. Hey, let me name every linebacker out there. I don't want to offend anybody, but I have no doubt in my mind that Kirby Smart knows how to get those guys generated. That he's seen it done enough times at Alabama, and even going back before Nick Saban and Kirby at Alabama, it was D'Amico Ryans, and then it was Rolando McClain, and every year or every group kind of had that alpha dog come through. I think that's a tough thing to do, but I think it's a guy you have to have. I think you have to have that Roquan Smith and that linebacking core that has that mentality, that physicality, and also can make the calls and do the communication on defense.
I'll get back to the Roquan Smith stuff in a minute, but we got a little bit of controversy. This is sort of like behind the scenes controversy. Greg Steele on the Facebook comment section making note of the fact that Cliff Nelson has apparently migrated over to the YouTube side of things to watch the show. Greg Steele says Cliff can't take the heat on the Facebook feed.
Cliff left, though. Cliff did leave. So Cliff said he had to go somewhere.
I feel like that's unfair. So Cliff's not even with us right now.
Cliff said, man, I didn't want to break my streak today because I've seen every episode of SC Country Live, so I just stopped by for 5 minutes, but my boss's boss's boss is in town.
Well, there you go. So it's Cliff starting off year 2, right, by watching at least a little bit of the show, but Greg Steele apparently feeling like that Cliff Nelson has left Facebook for a reason,
Migrated.
moved over to the YouTube side of things. I don't know, is this going to set up a scenario where you got like warring factions here? It almost becomes YouTube versus Facebook. These become like, you
got the Jets and the Sharks.
something like that. Is that what we're heading towards here in SEC Country
I don't
Live?
know. We got a small but solid group over here on YouTube, so I don't know if we'll ever get the numbers faction that Facebook has.
Kelly Cooper, by the way, who's got a Missouri Tiger logo as part of his Facebook profile, says give Missouri a closer look. We're actually going to talk some Missouri later on in the program here today, so looking forward to doing that here on SEC Country Live as well. Kelly, thanks for weighing in on the Facebook comment section here on SEC Country Live. Also, those of you watching on the YouTube side of things, including Enrique Morella, who says, if anyone knows about the linebacker situation in Georgia, it's Roquan Smith. If the talent pool at linebacker is there, they may be a little young, Enrique says, with a small number of reps, but I don't see the dog struggling much at linebacker. That is Enrique Murillo weighing in on that subject as far as the advice that Roquan Smith, who was as good as it comes to the linebacker position, what would he tell the guys who he leaves behind at UGA? Here's the advice he said he'd give them.
The only thing I would say is just try your best in everything that you do. Don't take anything for granted and, take advantage of every opportunity because not the next one is never promised and you never know what's in store for you. So just always make the best of everything. Don't take anything lightly. Learn everything you can while you can.
We can make a lot of this, but the truth is you understand this, having been a very good football player yourself. Trying to tab anybody with the logo, the label of next Roquan,
right,
that's really setting them up for a tough situation. These guys at Georgia notwithstanding, Georgia needs defensive stars to emerge, but to look at that interior linebacker position and say, hey, somebody here, whether it be even in the next 2 years, somebody here is going to be just as good as Roquan Smith was. Boy, that's asking an awful lot.
Yeah, it's asking a ton. I think the good news for Georgia fans is that they've been recruiting at such a high clip that there's bound to be one in there. You know what I mean? I don't know that you'll see the production. The next guy that's the middle linebacker at Georgia might not win the butt kiss, but I don't have a problem saying that Roquan was a generational type player. I think Cliff Payne in the YouTube comment section says, "Go Dogs," a Georgia fan. Time to accept that Roquan is a once in a generation player, kind of like David Pollock was, and that might be true, but I think there's more talent coming after Roquan. You feel better about how the position is going to be. Enough to say that even if he was a once-in-a-generation talent, there might be one coming up here in the next few years.
I feel like my prediction is coming true. Let me give you a couple examples on YouTube right now. Logan Westerman, who I believe now has pretty much become an exclusive YouTube viewer. He says YouTube is where the college football knowledge is. Tyler Mann says YouTube's where the real winners are. Facebook's a bunch of crybabies.
Crybabies.
I'm telling you, this Facebook versus YouTube feud, I'm not talking about like some sort of tech industry deal here. I'm talking about on our show, the Facebook faction, the YouTube faction, these could become warring sides here before it's all said and done.
Yeah, like I said, we're a small but an angry bunch over here on YouTube. And I've been popping back and forth, but I have a different computer now and I can't comment on Facebook right now for some reason, so I'll have to get that figured out so I can chat with you guys as well.
We appreciate those of you who are weighing in the comment section. Tyler Mann said some of y'all just go back and forth with each other all day long. They're not even listening to what we say. Hey, the fact of the matter is I don't really care. As long as y'all are having fun, I'm having fun with that, including Greg Steele, who always reminds me about 1980 in Georgia. Whatever's fun for y'all is fine with us. I can promise you that. Let me do item number 3 here, though, on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. We've talked a lot over the last couple of days, but the idea of the Alabama quarterback situation and what it means in the battle here coming up between Tua Tagovailoa, who finished off the national championship game, and Jalen Hurts, who started the rest of the season for the Alabama Crimson Tide. What's it going to be like this spring? Well, Chris Lowe, who has had a chance to sort of speak in an intimate setting with Nick Saban here recently, was a part of our Alabama SEC Country podcast. He told the host, Ryan Fowler, that when it comes to this quarterback situation, nobody knows more about this than Nick Saban does. Here's Chris Lowe from ESPN.
Listen, Nick Saban is smart enough, he's not going to tip his hand on what he's going to do. And I don't even think he knows yet. I mean, everybody's just I love how people seem to think they know more than the coaches, as if they've been at practice all day, every day. Clearly, Tua can sling it, all right? But why would you at this point designate that this guy's a starter, this guy's 1A, and this guy's 1B? Go in the spring, let him compete. See who it is. I mean, it's just like you told me yesterday. You can't fool a player. Players know who the best guy is, and then let it play out.
So that's Chris Lowe from ESPN. On with Ryan Fowler on the Alabama SEC Country podcast. And obviously it is true that no one knows more about this than Alabama does, but the idea that all of this so far has unfolded like Nick Saban planned it, that's complete fallacy. I don't think that's what Chris Lowe says there, but I am going to be a little bit suspicious of the Saban plan here, so to speak, the Saban idea on this, because I think, frankly, in 2017 he got lucky. I think he mishandled the quarterback situation, played the wrong guy too much, and at the very end, Tua Tagovailoa came in and saved the season for him. But we saw Nick Saban almost mishandle this quarterback situation a year ago. This idea that he's going to handle it perfectly in 2018, not based on the evidence from a season ago.
Yeah, boy, that got lucky is tough to swallow. Got lucky is tough to swallow, but I agree with you to an extent where.
But you agree, he started the wrong quarterback.
He toed the line. He definitely toed the line.
But he started the wrong quarterback against Georgia.
No. I don't think he started the wrong quarterback against Georgia. Now, do I wish Tua would have got some snaps like after the first two series? Yes. He definitely waited a while. He definitely waited and made me very uncomfortable about how I thought the game was going to end. I think that Nick Saban, I agree with your premise that, he might have gotten lucky and probably waited too long, but I don't know if he had any other choice. I really don't. I think that, and Chris Lowe says it in the interview, the players know who the best quarterback is. The quarterbacks know who the best quarterback is. And so if you're going to tell me that in a national title game that he's going to trot out, a different quarterback than the guy that's won, the 12 or 13 or whatever it was games to get him there, that's a tough call for him to make. So I think he made the call when he could make it. I think the way this situation is ending up, and it was too late to get on the show, but I was watching Bama's Pro Day before I walked in, and Greg McElroy does an interview with Nick Saban and asks him about the quarterback room.
Did he trash A.J. McCarron in the midst of talking about it?
He didn't go that far. Greg didn't say anything about A.J. McCarron. He just asked strictly about the current quarterbacks at Alabama. And I thought Nick was very candid and said, listen, these guys are going to battle it out. If there's a way to get both of them on the field, that's what we're going to do. If there's not a way to do that, then we're going to pick one and go with them. And I think that's the most that Nick Saban can say right now. I don't know if there's something to see through. I don't know if you read between the lines on what he's saying right now. Obviously, a lot of people think Tua was the best guy because of how it played out on the national scene. But I honestly believe that Nick Saban thinks, listen, if there's a way we can do it, then that's what I'm going to try to do.
Well, on that same subject, Chris Lowe was also asked by Ryan Fowler on the Alabama SEC Country podcast if it was real, this competition, so to speak, between Tua Tagovailoa or Jalen Hurts, or has Tua already passed up Jalen, and this is all an attempt to keep Jalen Hurts from transferring. Chris Lowe is very matter-of-fact in his statement about this.
I definitely think there'll be a competition. The only time we saw Tua was the second half. Granted, that was a big stage. He played great. Remember, think about how thin the margin is between what he did and what he didn't do. I mean, I think his first series he went 3 and out. If that the next series doesn't go as well as it did, do they go back to Jalen? So, I definitely think there's going to be a competition.
So he says the competition is going to be real between Tua and Jalen Hurts. This is not all just an attempt to keep both guys on campus, keep one from transferring. You agree with Chris Lowe on that?
I don't know about trying to keep one guy on campus. I think Nick Saban's very calculated in that. I think that he's calculated in the fact that he would never name a starter at this point anyways. It doesn't matter how the national championship game played out last year. It doesn't matter. Obviously, you have incumbent starters, and you would name that guy going into spring if Jalen had finished the season. Any quarterback competition, though, Nick Saban's not going to name a guy before the start of spring. He's not going to name a guy after the start of spring. He's probably not even going to name a guy by the end of fall camp. He's done it time and time again when they've had these competitions at quarterback. And so, listen, I don't know if Nick Saban says let's keep this going just so these guys stay on campus, or just because Jalen or Tua, neither one of them transfers. But I think that's definitely one of the upsides of the way Nick Saban conducts business.
Joel Anthony Dean, the comment section, says BA been hitting the sauce again today.
I saw that.
I opened up my own mouth on this, and now this is just a part of every show for the rest of the time.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Me looking drunk. So there you go. We'll have some fun with that in the comment section. And listen, this is also one of those subjects, when it comes to this Alabama situation, that we're going to keep talking about here for a while. And I don't think there's anything wrong with Nick Saban, trying to find a pathway for what I assume is the underdog in this race, Jalen Hurts. If Saban knows, and he keeps saying over and over again, or at least it keeps being attributed to Saban over and over again, that the players will know who the better of the two guys is. I think it was probably true last year. I think deep down, everybody on that Alabama roster probably knew that Tua Tagovailoa was better. But if that's also true going into 2018, then Saban's obviously in the wrong if he's pretending otherwise. However, apart from just absolutely knowing that Tua is better than Jalen, I don't think it's wrong for Saban to give some sort of pathway for Jalen Hurts.
I don't think it either. And that's kind of the situation we look at where we say, boy, we're moving into spring. Who's going to get that first snap? Who's going to, who at A-Day, which team is going to have which guy? And I fully expect that Jalen is going to be given every consideration. I think Nick Saban feels like, now I'm not saying that he does, but Nick Saban feels like he at least owes that to Jalen Hurts. Boy, I yanked you out at halftime of the national title game after you worked all season to get us the national title game. I yanked it at halftime. I fully expect him to come out and whatever the offensive team is, the offensive one teams during A-Day, and I fully expect him to take the snaps all throughout fall camp. I'm telling you, when Tua gets the job, it's going to be like in the middle of a game in week 1 against Louisville. I just don't see us having any definitive answer before then.
A couple comments. Kevin Grubb says, I truly think that Jalen Hurts should think about changing positions, especially if he wants an NFL career. I don't see him on Sunday as a quarterback. I don't either. Bo Molinari, though, slightly different opinion. He says Hurts needs to do what's best for him. He starts elsewhere. He needs to transfer. Here's the thing about quarterback. Guys who play quarterback like playing quarterback. And Jalen Hurts is the kind of athlete, I told you, I saw some things athletically from him running the football in the national championship game that truly impressed me. He's clearly a weapon with the ball in his hands, but he's playing quarterback. He'd probably like to do that at the NFL level. When you think about transferring, going somewhere else, it's almost a step down in terms of on-field success. And you came to Alabama because you want to learn that pro-style offense and have a chance to play in the NFL. Finding a new college home, if Jalen Hurts were to decide to do that, is a little easier said than done. And the transition to another position, even if that's where his NFL future might eventually be, that's also a little easier said than done.
Yeah, it's tough because I don't know what position we're trading into for Jalen Hurts. I know he's a good runner with the ball, but is he a running back? I don't know. I haven't seen him run with the running back style and the shoulder pads down and getting extra yards. I don't know if he's a slot receiver. I don't know what he is. He's an offensive weapon. I will tell you the one thing that I've kept track of throughout this offseason, it's going to be something everybody in college football is going to be keeping track of, is these new transfer rules. I mean, if it comes around that in June or July, these guys can start leaving school and not having to sit out a year, then all of a sudden that opens up a ton of possibilities. Then all of a sudden Jalen can get 2 years at Florida Atlantic under Lane Kiffin or one of these other systems that don't have a quarterback within the SEC. I think if you have to transfer and sit out a year and then you have 1 year to play quarterback for Jalen Hurts, who needs these game reps if he's going to get to the NFL, then I think that's a different type situation.
On Facebook, Anthony Lee says, I wish they had a yawn emoji for Saban's quarterback soap opera. I'm actually surprised they don't have a yawn emoji, but nonetheless, he says Hurts is going to be gone before the season starts, which is why they're talking about getting a transfer quarterback coming in. He's obviously referencing Gardner Minshew from East Carolina, who is going to be in the Alabama roster. Do you agree with Anthony that Hurts is gone before the season starts?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Listen, if I am a gambling man, so I wasn't going to say if I'm a gambling man, but if I am a gambling man, I don't think Jalen Hurts.
I don't know you can gamble on this, but I know what you mean. Yeah.
I don't think Jalen Hurts is going anywhere. I really don't. I think that he finds some kind of niche within this offense. I think Nick Saban makes him some sort of promise that you will still be on the field, even if you're not the starting quarterback. You will have some sort of piece in this system.
How about Dina Barnes-White? This is an opinion that is worth bringing up because it's a little bit different than what I usually express. I think even what you express, and maybe what a lot of other Alabama fans have said. Dina says Tua doesn't have the experience and the mindset that Jalen does, so I don't see Jalen transferring for that reason, or Tua too, she says, roll tide. We don't have a lot of full-throated Jalen Hurts defenders in our comment section, but it sounds like Dina Barnes-White is one.
Yeah, and mindset goes a long way, and obviously Jalen's one of those guys who's proven. I mean, he has proven on the field. It's not like we're just guessing about a new recruit coming in. Jalen's proven on the field that he is a competitor, and I think he'll continue to compete. I know that everybody talks about him transferring. I still think the opportunity would be there if they come up with the new rules and he can get out of town and not have to sit out a year, but aside from that, I'm telling you, like I said, I'm a gambling man. I don't see the situation where Jalen Hurts leaves and goes somewhere else and sits out a year and then plays quarterback for a year in the Big 12 or in the ACC. I just don't see it. I think he becomes part of the system, and when his time comes to go to his pro day, he'll choose a position and go from there.
All right, let's do item number 4 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And we spent a lot of time talking about this it was a little bit less than a year ago, but it was back during the spring and summer months. It's the subject of item number 4 here. The unusual story of Jamar Chase, the LSU wide receiver now, but almost at one point in time became a TCU wide receiver. Do you remember the deal here? Let me show you the quote that Chase gave to Nick Suss from SEC Country. He says, I was ready to commit, not to LSU, to TCU. Then I got kicked off the network somehow. He's talking about the NFL network. He says, after that, I looked at that as a sign. Maybe I should follow another step. Maybe I should do something else. That's what I did. So for those of you who don't remember, Jamar Chase was an outstanding wide receiver, one of the real nice additions to LSU's 2018 class. Back during the spring of the summer, it was actually during the summer because it was during the opening when it was in Oregon back in June. Chase was going to go on the NFL Network. I don't know why it was the NFL Network, but that's the network he was going on to. He was going to commit to TCU on the show, but the show got busy. They ran out of time. They were going to have to push Jamar Chase's announcement to another day. Well, when the TV announcement got canceled, he changed his mind.
Yeah.
He said, maybe I should think more about this, and it eventually led to a process that ultimately allowed Chase to end up at LSU. Is this one of the stranger recruiting stories you can remember?
Well, the funny part is, like, in my brain, like, all these twisted theories come up, and you can just see Ed Orgeron calling somebody, "Hey, listen, you got to get this kid off the air at the NFL Network. Well, we need some more time to recruit this guy."
At the time, I forget who the other school was, but the second school was not LSU, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, who was that? I can't remember. Who
maybe it was LSU. I don't know, because he'd been involved with Florida. He'd actually at one time been a Kansas commit.
Yeah, I think that's true.
So he decommitted from Kansas. How in the world does a 4-star receiver end up mixed up with Kansas? Talking about hanging out with the wrong crowd. That for a guy like Jamar Chase, that's the wrong crowd. But yeah, it would have been TCU that day.
Yeah, Tyler Mann and Shannon Burgess back to back. Thank you, NFL Network. And
I mean, Chase is a good player.
Yeah, no, Chase is going to be a heck of a player. He's like one of these long, rangy guys, and we've mentioned that LSU wide receiver core and some of the younger talent they have in there. And I think he's going to flourish. Obviously, we can talk upside down about what the quarterback position at LSU will be, but there's no doubt that this was a huge addition for Ed Orgeron. I mean, go back to signing day now, and you talk about some of the ups and downs that LSU had, and obviously Mario Goodrich and Patrick Surtain.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if Jamar Chase doesn't come either? I mean, imagine if Jamar Chase was already heading to TCU and they were still trying to scrounge for another recruit to come to LSU. It would have been beyond bad for LSU.
Well, what's painful about Jamar Chase from that standpoint is his pull to TCU was Justin Rogers, the quarterback, a guy that I thought that LSU should have gotten.
Yeah.
The fact that LSU let him end up at TCU, I thought was a little bit of a swing and miss for Ed Orgeron anyway. If Rogers had some coattails that had kind of brought Jamar Chase there to Fort Worth too, that would have been a doubly bad deal.
You know what's crazy? Because in my mindset, I still think of TCU as not in the Big 12. I mean, when I was in college, TCU was, I don't even remember where they were playing it, but TCU was one of those teams that was just always amongst the Boise States of the world and the Utahs and the bracket busters and the guys that were going to come in and fill in some of these areas. So TCU winning some of these recruiting battles, I guess I shouldn't be shocked. They are a Big 12 team and they do win some of these battles in the obviously in the state of Texas, but still in my mind, I think about LSU matchup with TCU and it's not one they should lose.
On YouTube, 98 Sports Talk says if LSU can find a quarterback, ... And here's my assumption. My assumption is from 98 there that this is that sort of callback to what's been said over and over again. And it's funny how this narrative for LSU just doesn't really change. That LSU's been looking for a quarterback forever. Sort of before and after the 1 year of Zach Mettenberger. This is a program that's been looking for that quarterback. And it's kind of funny. Here we are going into 2018. Sort of saying the same thing still.
It's weird, too, because when I think about – and people ask me about the LSU. I know a ton of LSU fans. They ask me about the LSU quarterback competition. It's not that I'm down on Miles Brennan. It's not that, I don't think Miles Brennan could possibly be the guy. He has a long future ahead of him at LSU. I just don't know. And to me, if I don't know and you're not hearing it out of LSU and you're not seeing some of the things out of Ed Orgeron talking about Miles Brennan – then I don't know what we're getting. I mean, he could possibly be the guy. Maybe he's the guy that takes LSU the distance for the next few years. But we just, in the short amount of time you saw windows of Miles Brennan last year, it just didn't look like it, in my opinion.
So we got some unhappy folks here, Bo Molinari included. Who else did I see in the comment section a moment ago? Talking about Maurice Carter as well, saying we're talking too much about Florida today. A second Florida topic coming in here for item number 5 on our SEC Country Live first and 10 list. Bo Molinari says, I guess 4 wins last season means you get 4 bullet points every day on SEC Country Live. Folks are keeping track here. They are keeping receipts for who we're talking about. Yeah. Too much Florida? 2 Florida topics in one day? Too much here?
What's funny is sometimes I forget that the next topic is underneath, so I look at the comment section. I'm like, what are you guys talking about? We're not even talking about Florida. We're talking about LSU right now and Jamar Chase, and somehow Florida keeps coming up. But it is funny.
But it is time to talk about the Florida Gators here a little bit for item number 5 on our SEC Country Live first and 10 list. And former Florida coach Urban Meyer, quoted by Jacksonville.com with some praise for the current Florida coach, Dan Mullen. Here's what Meyer had to say. He says it's great for Florida, great hire. Mullen knows the landscape. He knows Florida. The SEC East is going to feel Dan Mullen. Now, I don't put a lick of credibility into what Meyer says about his former protege here in Dan Mullen. Coaches always say nice things about each other. Right. They have each other's back. It's almost disgusting the way that they sort of support each other through thick and thin in that regard. In this case, Mullen worked for Urban Meyer. My question is, though, and I mean this in all honesty, do Florida fans want to hear from Urban Meyer on their coach now, or is this a guy they're like, you know what? Why don't you go up to Columbus and spend time with your family?
Oh, I think that Florida fans still like Urban Meyer, right? I mean, he won 2 national titles and a Heisman Trophy there. I mean, what?
I honestly don't know.
Now, you thought it was going to last for 20 years, and it did. You know, it ended up lasting for, 5 or 6. But
he faked being sick to get out of the job, and then said he was going to spend time with his family, and then a year later, he's back coaching in Columbus, Ohio.
He had heart troubles. B.A., I mean, listen,
don't start with the heart trouble.
Listen, that 09 SEC championship game where he had the heart troubles, that was a tough game for him. I was there.
I think Urban Meyer's cardiologist is the same person who's making death threats against Jim McElwain, if you get my drift.
Oh, here we go. No. You know what?
All that sort of goes the same category of unverified Florida stories.
You know, I do think it is interesting because I'm pretty sure, obviously I wouldn't be able to find it, but I'm pretty sure Nick Saban said something along these very similar lines about Jim McElwain when Jim McElwain was out of Florida. So it does go in the coach speak, and we're buddy-buddy, and I think that they can do a good job. And to me, I still believe in Jim McElwain as a coach. I know a lot of people don't. I don't think he was the micromanager that Nick Saban was. I think he understood, the systems, and I think he understood X's and O's. But, when you hear the stories come out about how the strength and conditioning was, that, under Jim McElwain, or some of the other things that the recruiting, it just didn't match up with what Nick Saban thought Jim McElwain might be able to be. Now, I fully believe that Urban Meyer thinks that Dan Mullen's the guy. I mean, he would know better than anybody. He saw Dan Mullen in Gainesville up close and saw him work with quarterbacks. But I am interested to hear from Florida fans if they want to hear that out of Urban Meyer.
Yeah, because I am curious. I mean, this is not me trying to stir up trouble. I sort of have my suspicions if Florida fans even like Meyer. While we get some of those comments, I'll also mention Indy Anderson here, who brings a pretty good point. That one of the first steps that Dan Mullen can take to prove Urban Meyer right here about the Gators is just be better than Florida State. That to me seems like a reasonable first-year goal. It's first-year Dan Mullen. It's first-year Willie Taggart. Talent levels in the two teams should be relatively equal, although Florida State's got a better quarterback. But can you beat the Seminoles for the first time in 5 years?
That's such a good point. That's such a good point because that's just a hump that, really Will Muschamp and Jim McElwain weren't able to get over. And Florida State, it has been one of those things where Florida dominated Florida State for a while there, back when Urban Meyer was in there. But then all of a sudden the tables turn, and Florida State was the one making national title runs and college football playoff runs, and Florida just hasn't been able to give it the hope. So I think that is a good point. Listen, both those programs are kind of starting from ground zero right now with coaches they feel really good about in the future. Which one of those guys can recruit, and which one can get on top of the other program faster in the state of Florida?
James Perkins says, does Urban Meyer know that Dan Mullen was already a coach in the SEC? Yeah, it's not like he's, some guy sort of arriving on the scene out of nowhere. We do have a little bit of a track record for Dan Mullen. Pete Shooter Smith also says Urban Meyer can't comment on the SEC. He may have to fake another heart attack. I'm telling you, that melodrama from Meyer back in 2010, people don't like that.
Listen, I just want to believe it was true, though, because I was on the field that day, playing Alabama. Yeah. You look over at Urban Meyer, and he's got the headset across.
That's the next year, though.
What's that?
Yeah, he coached in 2010.
I know, but, he went to the hospital after the SEC title game in 09.
Again? Jeez.
Yeah, no, it was the first time. But I can't pull the comment up. God, this computer's giving me a lot of trouble. But somebody in the comment section, you guys can tell me the name, said in the Facebook comment section that they think Dan Mullen was the reason Urban Meyer won at Florida in the first place. That maybe Mullen was kind of the key ingredient the whole time when Urban Meyer was down there, and that's why they believe Florida will get back to the top. I can't say that that's 100% true, but I've heard a lot of people say the same things about Kirby Smart and Nick Saban.
Kevin Grubb says Meyer wouldn't have stayed at Florida over Ohio State. I don't have hard feelings outside of the Gators. I root for his success. Hashtag Meyer fan for life. At the time, I didn't view Ohio State to be a better job than Florida. I think Ohio State's a great job, but leaving Florida at the time was leaving one of the 2 or 3 best jobs in the entire country.
Yeah, it definitely was. And the thing I feel about, when I look at the Ohio State job, you really are carrying an entire conference. I mean, you really are carrying the whole conference on your back at the Ohio State job. And he had peers in the SEC, and that's what I think gives him that mantra of, boy, he ran away from what the job was at Florida.
Keith Lane says he's good with Urban Meyer talking about the Gators. He says Florida's going to be back on top of the SEC East again very soon. I guess that's also the issue here is if you're optimistic about Dan Mullen, you're sort of water under the bridge with whatever it may have happened with Urban Meyer. I guess that's sort of the takeaway when it comes to something like that.
I think you like the fact that Dan Mullen was a part of that previous regime. So I don't know how you can really love Dan Mullen and hate Urban Meyer.
Really quick here, Logan Westerman also has a really good point on YouTube that there's been a lot of rising and falling when it comes to Urban Meyer assistant coaches. You can say the same thing about Dan Mullen with his time at Florida, but how about Tom Herman as his offensive coordinator in in 2014. Good enough for a national championship. That offense, though, when Herman was gone, not quite as good anymore. I think that's a really good point from Logan Westerman, that the best years for Urban Meyer have included these offensive coordinators on the verge of becoming head coaches, but once they're gone, what's left over in their way?
Yeah, but I still have a ton of respect for Urban Meyer. You're talking about a guy who's won national titles at 2 different schools. You're talking about a guy who was also really good at Utah. And I know that Dan Mullen was a part of all these things, and you've had really good assistant coaches, but I think, listen, that's the trademark sometimes for good head coaches. You have to have good coordinators on both sides of the ball. Urban Meyer has shown the ability to win not just some of his games, he has won a ton of games. So I'm going to give him the benefit of that.
But as 98 Sports Talk says, Nick Saban would not have lost to Iowa by 31 points, nor would have Kirby Smart. That is a blight on his resume for right now.
I couldn't tell you how true that. I don't think Nick Saban, I think that 15 points is his biggest loss.
Plus embarrassment to Clemson in the college football playoff a year ago. That may be ultimately as much as anything about why they didn't make the playoff this year, because they would have had to play the same team again that had just clobbered them a year before.
Yep, I completely agree with that. And to me, that's one of the special things, and obviously I'm not going to go on a Bama tangent, but when you look at what Nick Saban has been able to do, it really, when you measure it up against that, really is incredible.
Did you go to Bama? I didn't realize that.
Roll Tide. Anybody?
All right, item number 6 here. Speaking of Alabama, speaking of Chris Lowe, who we had some audio from a little early in the show from our SEC Country Alabama podcast, Lowe also tweeting a little tidbit, little nugget about Dabo Swinney's office here. I thought this was kind of interesting. I don't really have anything great to say about this. Chris Lowe says Dabo Swinney's office is full of pictures and mementos, including a framed letter from Nick Saban after he paid off their ongoing dinner bet when the Tigers won the 2016 national title. Saban complimented Swinney in his note for, quote, exemplifying what college football should be about. Couple things here. Kind of a classy move that Saban writes the note. Kind of cool that Dabo Swinney kept it.
Yeah.
How much would you love to be a fly on the wall for a dinner between these two guys?
Boy, that would be pretty incredible. And obviously, a ton of respect between the two. And obviously, Dabo's a guy who I respect, because I think Nick is right in that instance where you can say what you want to about the ACC. You can say what you want to about Clemson, but there is a little bit, maybe not South Carolina fans out there watching the show, but you do look at Dabo, and he's one of those guys that's just likable. And how many times have we mentioned a guy like Jimbo Fisher, who sometimes is not that likable? We've mentioned maybe, is he already, one of the most hated coaches in the SEC? Dabo's just one of the guys, to me anyways, that you look at and go, boy, you know what? If somebody else besides my team has to win, I don't mind that it's a guy like Dabo Swinney. So I think that's what Nick Saban was kind of referring to when he says, you're what college football should be about. I think everybody can get behind that.
So I sort of have this picture in my mind of these two at dinner, and I feel like I've been in this situation before in life where Saban probably can't stop talking about himself and about how tough he's got it, and Dabo Swinney's in a position where you sort of have to sit there and sort of politely listen. I sort of get that vibe from these two at dinner. Younger Swinney having to listen to Saban, who's sort of waxing on about, I'll tell you what you should do, and let me tell you how you should handle your life, and here's what you need to do about this, and Swinney's too polite to sort of interrupt. I sort of feel like in a dinner meeting between Saban and Swinney, Saban's doing a lot of talking, Swinney's doing a lot of listening.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I don't think Dabo would mind that. I think that, listen, the reason that Dabo has framed a letter from Nick Saban is obviously because he has a ton of respect.
Yeah, that's true.
You don't frame a letter and put it on your wall if you don't respect who wrote the letter and it doesn't mean a lot to you. So I can definitely see a situation where Dabo's just, and Nick doesn't drink, but maybe Dabo's having a beer.
Does Nick Saban not drink alcohol at all?
I think he quit drinking like 20 years ago. I think Nick got in a little bit of trouble with Miss Terry at some point about drinking, and he's told us before that he just had to make a decision one time to stop.
Well, there you go. Good for him on that front. I feel like there's also maybe a more substantial bet than dinner. Wouldn't it be better if these coaches that are friends, instead of betting dinner with each other, the loser had to wash the winner's car? Wouldn't that be better? Instead of Saban buying Dabo dinner, wouldn't you love to see Saban out there scrubbing the car?
Yeah.
Or the year before, Dabo's out there having to wax the Mercedes. Wouldn't you love that?
Yeah, there's got to be something better out there. Even like the losing coach has to go through combine drills. It's something like that. I definitely think I would love to know some of the best like winner loser bets. I'm sure the people in the comment section have some incredible ones.
All right, speaking of losers, item number 7 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list, the guy that lost his way out of Tennessee is head coach Derek Dooley, now Missouri offensive coordinator, and he had a downright strange explanation for what his offense is going to look like here. He told Dave Matter, a reporter covering the Missouri Tigers, that he calls the offense Wikipedia. That's what it is right now, our offense. Every day you can go there and there's a new sentence, I wonder who added that. The idea is I don't want to just cram some system down them. Everything they do is brand new. We want to build on some things they did well here. We want to add some things to help us have a little flexibility. and how he attacked defenses. I think by Wikipedia means there's a little more added every single day. There may be a better analogy out there than Wikipedia,
right,
which I sort of thought of as sort of a crowdsourced thing of, yeah, we got a little bit from Bill Walsh,
right,
a little bit from Chip Kelly, a little bit from, you know, I don't even know who else. Is the Wikipedia offense the cure for what ails Missouri here in 2018?
I think the interesting part I take away this from as a player, because when I was in the NFL, we transitioned to the iPads. You know, we used to have the hard copy, books where they had to print them off. Basically, every time a play was added, there was some GA in there. You'd print them off and punching holes and put them. And then you went to the, the playbook on the iPad where everything just downloads from Wi-Fi. So I can see Derek Dooley pulling out his iPad and being like, who put this in here? Who added these 3 pages? Like, I didn't even write off on this. But I'm telling you right now, there's something to read between the lines here when it comes to Missouri's offense, because I think I was so nervous for Drew Lock and for Missouri fans that when Derek Dooley got there, he's going to wipe the slate clean. He was going to start running what they ran in Dallas, or maybe bring some stuff back from Louisiana Tech or Tennessee. To hear him say that he's going to build on some of the things they've done well in the past, to me, Missouri fans probably feel the same way. Music to your ears. Don't take away what Drew Lock's been doing. Don't take away what the offense has been doing, because for most of the part of the year last year, they were an explosive offense.
I agree with Teresa Stewart on this. Derek Dooley's a joke. And y'all can make fun of Butch Jones being an analyst at Alabama all you want. Saban hiring Butch Jones as an analyst is way less embarrassing to me than Barry Odom, who I'm not even sure why he's got a job. Barry Odom hiring Derek Dooley's offensive coordinator. That's the more embarrassing former Tennessee head coach currently employed in the SEC. It is not Butch Jones, an Alabama analyst.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, it's 2 different roles, too. I mean, when you talk
about
That's
what I'm saying, but people are going to give a lot of attention to former Tennessee coach Butch Jones, Alabama. What's Saban thinking? The relevant question here is, relative to obviously fan interest, but the relevant question is, what is Barry Odom thinking?
Yeah.
There's a chance that this is the first line of his
I was going to ask you that. Do you think when we get to December next year, Barry Odom's the first coach to go from the SEC?
Oh, I think he very well could be.
If not the only coach.
Yeah, I think he very well could be. I mean, there's some certain sense of either just guys getting started or, some guys are sort of firmly cemented there. I do not think that Derek Dooley's likely to be a good hire. This idea that he's going to build on Josh Heupel's offense, I'm not sure Derek Dooley knows Josh Heupel's offense.
Well, you guys over here on the YouTube page are absolutely killing Missouri. And half the time, Sandberg says, half the time I forget they're even in the conference. 98 Sports Talk says, I have to think that some school agreed to join, then backed out, and Mizzou was the backup plan. so I definitely, listen, Mizzou, to me, even when they showed up in Atlanta a couple years back to back, I wasn't sure, because, just regional, just from just a geographic standpoint, it just didn't make a lot of sense to me. But I've met a couple Missouri fans, and I played with some Missouri people in Atlanta with the Falcons, and they were excited about being in the SEC. Yeah. So I try not to come down on them too hard, but you guys are just opening up on it in the comments.
I mean, when they hired Josh Heupel from Utah State to be the offensive coordinator, I said at the time, I thought it was a brilliant hire. It turned out to be that way. Now Heupel's a head coach. But going and trying to resurrect the career of Derek Dooley, which probably didn't deserve to be brought back from the dead, I just think that's a bad idea. For a guy in Barry Odom, that if he walked across this stage right now and showed up on camera, I don't think anybody would know who he is. I mean, that's probably not a great sign for him.
I don't even know that I would know Barry Odom. like if you just walked in the room, I say, boy, that guy looks familiar. Where can I pick that guy out of? And this is a guy we talk to. I'm not going to say we talk about Missouri and Barry Odom every day, but at least once a week we bring up Barry Odom. It's just, it kind of goes along the lines of what we were saying about Chad Morris in recruiting season. He's just not making that big of a footprint, just not making that big of a splash where you say, boy, this is definitely going to work out. Barry Odom's just one of those thoughts. You just kind of think of him in just a different realm.
You know what Barry Odom looks like to me? He looks like the guy at a restaurant who's been waiting for his food like a little too long. Like he's like, when's my steak going to get here? That's sort of like the sort of perpetual look that Barry Odom has in his face. He's sort of like at a restaurant sort of waiting for his food, sort of that frustrated look. Anyway, item number 8 here on our SEC Country Life First and 10 list. We don't talk a ton of basketball on this show, but I thought this was kind of interesting. Auburn got completely snubbed from the SEC end-of-season stuff here. Bruce Pearl overlooked for Coach of the Year, despite the fact that Auburn had quite the run. No Auburn player on the first team All-SEC, despite the fact that Bryce Brown was one of the league's top players. One Auburn fan, dadgummit, has had enough. And here is his message here on social media. The SEC hat with all the various logos, and he's going to set this thing afire. Now, listen. I cannot condone you guys setting anything on fire. Please don't do that. And don't take this segment as somehow, glorifying, burning stuff. But I got to tell you, Sky Underwood's the guy's name, I guess. I sort of understand where he's coming from here. The Auburn snub is pretty pathetic on the part of the SEC.
It's pathetic, but let me ask you something. Why do you respect that? Like, what's the point of him burning it? Why? First of all, why do you even buy an SEC hat that had every SEC? Like, who are you rooting for? Like, are you just rooting for the conference as a whole? I don't get it.
I also think it's funny is of all the things to burn a hat over, this is not like the thing that's like, okay, that's it. Now it's time to burn a hat.
That's my breaking point.
This is sort of like relatively minor on the list of overall snubs. My point is, I think he's justifying being upset. Now, I'm a little bit surprised that he took it to this level, but sort of justifying being upset on this.
Yeah, I mean, I see it too. And was Deontay Mayton named the SEC basketball player?
From Georgia.
Yeah, and it kind of goes along the same things where you would think that those two things would match up more often, like they do in football. A lot of times you get whoever wins the SEC championship, the player of the year is on that team, and vice versa, and the coach of the year and all that. It just, to me, the SEC has been so good all around this year that everything's scattered out. Colin Sexton won like freshman of the year. You had a bunch of awards being handed out at Tennessee because they're so good. Auburn's been one of the best teams. It's been so spread out, and the awards are spread out because every team, to me, has some kind of talent.
Ken Sagini, though, in the comment section, and Ken, if I mispronounce your name, I certainly didn't mean to. He actually brings up the other point, though, that I wanted to bring up on this. Can we see the video one more time? Because Ken asked a great question. He says, who would wear this hat? Now, I think it's a fair point. I like the white SEC hat with the SEC logo, but look there on the side. It's got all the other logos. Who is going to wear a hat with a logo of a team you don't like?
That was my point.
If you think I'm going to wear a Florida logo on the side of a hat or an Auburn, I mean, you're not looking to wear, that. I don't know who this hat is for. I sort of think it's funny that it becomes sort of the object of protest here. But I think Ken asked a great question. Who is wearing a hat with your rival's logo on the side?
That's what I just said. That's what you
said that.
Just to lead off the segment, you're like, man, I really respect the fact that he's got. I don't even know why you buy this hat in the first place. Like, why does this guy?
What I said was, I respect the idea that he's sort of drawn a line in the sand. We're not going to take this anymore. But the hat is still pretty weird.
Yeah, I don't know. I've seen this hat before, and I saw it at like the SEC baseball tournament, maybe in Hoover, and it was from like a guy like working on the camera crew. It was like, okay, I understand what that guy's here for business.
Yeah, it's one thing if like Greg Sankey's wearing this hat. They're all his schools, but the rest of us aren't claiming these other schools.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why you wear it. I can see like like a house divided kind of thing. Two schools maybe. If you're wearing all 14 of them.
You can't be divided 14 different ways.
Yeah,
all right. Another sort of quick point on this, and then we'll move on. Have you ever heard the phrase, it's not paranoia if they really are out to get you? Have you ever heard that phrase before?
I don't think so, but I'm going to go with
in this case, kind of work with me. Is this one of those deals of, we don't like Bruce Pearl, we think he's shady, we disrespect Auburn's success, therefore we're going to ignore it? Is Auburn here on the short end of the stick because of what may be sort of a concerted belief that Auburn's not doing things the right way?
I hadn't thought of it that way, but when you bring the point up, it definitely sounds something that would go on behind the scenes of the SEC, does it not? Like you can see people behind the scenes like pushing one direction or pushing the other. And listen, this was a big conversation when I got to school and Cam Newton was about to win the Heisman Trophy. Boy, is Cam Newton, are Heisman Trophy voters going to vote for Cam Newton with all the cloud behind Cam Newton about did he get paid to go here? Did Mississippi State recruit him? Did Auburn pay him more than Mississippi State was offering? And he comes out and wins the Heisman Trophy. And the same thing's happened a couple of times throughout the years where there's been clouds around it. I don't know, but it's an interesting point to bring up.
I don't know what this means. I think it's really funny. Lindsey Page says it's the only hat Greg McElroy wears.
Yeah.
Because that's pretty funny. I think that's pretty funny. Let me just move on and leave that one be. Item number 9 here on our SEC Country Live.
That is golden right there, buddy. That's good stuff.
First and 10 list. I've got some good news for Vanderbilt. By the way, for those of you who say we don't touch on enough schools, we've hit more schools that we don't normally mention in the show today than normally. We had a little Missouri earlier. How about a little Vanderbilt here, picking up a 2018 four-star linebacker, made official by the young man's mom on Twitter. Tamina Messina's the mom here. Said, blessed and honored to have Salua, that's her son, Salua Messina, sign his national letter of intent to Vanderbilt. Thanks to all who were part of getting him there. Hashtag anchor down. Hashtag happy. This is one of the top linebackers in the country. We've seen this a little bit the last couple of years of guys kind of taking their recruitment past National Signing Day. Messina is an example of that there. I think this is a huge addition for a Vanderbilt program. Very quietly, we all kind of come from an era when Vanderbilt was always sort of a given, the worst team in the SEC. I got news for you. Commodores are not the worst team in the SEC right now. Not from a recruiting standpoint, not from an on-field standpoint. Derek Dooley's doing a little something.
Yeah, not from the on-field standpoint. You mentioned it. When you talk about the talent level, Derek Mason, it's interesting for me because I was really high on the fact that I thought Vanderbilt was going to make some damage last year, and I don't know that in my eyes it really got to that level.
Well, if what's his name hadn't run his mouth before the Alabama game, I think the whole season could have been different. Who was my guy who was that was a disaster.
Yeah, that didn't end up being very good. But, I think this is a win for Vanderbilt. I think that obviously I have my questions, what took so long? Why is it in March? Usually when this comes down, it's like, boy, you hear recruits saying, boy, I had to get my grades in line so I know that can't be the case at Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
Like Vanderbilt, your grades have to be good to get in anyway. So I don't know what the story is there. But either way you slice it, it is a huge win for Derek Mason. It's a huge win for Vanderbilt to get a linebacker of his caliber on campus when there's other teams around the SEC. Keep in mind, there's other teams around the SEC that didn't fill up their allotment of recruits and are looking for linebackers. To get him on campus is a big deal.
Shannon Burgess says he's possibly smarter than everyone here in the chat. He's certainly probably a pretty sharp guy. Obviously, if you're getting into Vanderbilt, that says something about you, especially coming across the country from Utah the way that he is there. And I think this is a good addition. I got news for you. If you're an SEC school, as I've said, you're used to Vanderbilt being the one team you could beat up on, you knew you could kick around. The fact of the matter is, if you can't identify Vanderbilt as the worst team in the SEC, a lot of these fan bases are starting to be fearful of, hey, maybe it's us. Maybe we're worse than Vanderbilt, because there are a couple teams in the SEC that definitely are.
I think Hardwired brings up a good point of conversation. Boy, I can't talk today. Good point of conversation. YouTube comment section says Vandy needs offense.
That's true.
And that is a good point. Derek Mason, they've been respectable defensively, but they have, other than some of the people they've had in certain situations, they've had good linebackers here for the last few years, but they do need one of those playmakers down there. Really, Vanderbilt historically, when I've thought of them being good, they've had one of those guys that can go up and get the ball or run the ball.
Robert Cook disagrees with me. He says they are the worst team in the SEC. I don't think there's a chance in the world they're the worst. I don't think there's a chance in the world.
Boy, it's tough. I put like 3 or 4 teams in there. I'm not going to name them right now because I don't want to pick that fight here at 3:59.
I'll say Ole Miss and Arkansas may both be worse. Actually, Ole Miss may not be worse. Ole Miss got a couple good players. Arkansas is worse than
Arkansas is going to have to do more with less this year if they're going to turn that ship right in the right direction for sure. I mean, that's the nicest way.
I think the problem in Fayetteville is they may do nothing with a little.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things you could see happen.
But one of the good pieces of news for the Hogs is they are on their way, in all likelihood anyway, to the NCAA tournament. Let's make a little bit of basketball the subject of item number 10 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And if y'all just want to flood the comment section with your own thoughts here, SEC tournament begins tonight. Georgia and Vanderbilt sort of start things off there. It gets better from there, though. Don't worry about that. Who you got? Who wins this tournament in your mind?
Chad Clark's still talking about the last comment. He said Vandy's the best football team in Tennessee. That might actually be true.
That'd be a pretty good goal for Jeremy Pruitt's first year too. Find a way to be better than Vanderbilt.
Yeah, Florida conversation heads.
You got an SEC tournament winner?
I just don't know. I feel like every team in the SEC has beat every other team, and you've seen. Florida's been good at times. Tennessee's been extremely hot. Auburn obviously has been good all year. Kentucky's obviously
A&M's worked its way into the tournament here.
A&M's been great. I think Alabama and A&M face off tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Alabama's been a team that was good at certain points and I think they've lost 6 in a row now. So you never know what you're going to get out of them. They've knocked off some big ones but lost some big ones. So this to me, of all the years I've actually followed SEC basketball, this is the hardest year to pick a winner. I really, Kentucky's going to be the favorite. Big Blue Nation's going to show up. Tennessee's been good here and there.
Well, they're not the favorite, but they are my pick. I think Kentucky wins this thing.
No, what I'm saying is in the past you've been able to show up and say, boy, Kentucky's the favorite to win this thing. I don't think you can say that this year. I don't think Kentucky.
But they're winning the tournament. They're going to win the tournament. Kentucky's winning the SEC tournament. I got Kentucky beating Arkansas in the final.
I don't think so. I'm gonna go out and say I think Tennessee is maybe the team to win this tournament.
Rick Barnes.
They've been good.
He had Kevin Durant on his team.
I think
couldn't even get to the second round of the NCAA tournament.
I think they're getting good at the right time.
All right, well, we'll see about that. Y'all can put your comments in the comment section on that. Let's close the show the way we always do. First of all, yeoman's work today by the folks behind the scenes. We talk about Hannah, Michael a lot. Of course, y'all know Hannah. You see her on video a lot. Michael, you hear us talk about him a lot. They help us get the show on. Patrick and Kaya also today. Not an easy day to be here when the rest of the folks are gone home, but we certainly appreciate all the help that we've got. And you know what? Every day they come in and they keep their head on a swivel. They never miss what's out there for them, what's in store for them. Can't say the same thing about one NFL hopeful, though, and that's the subject of today's champion of life, who, on the biggest moment of his life, frankly, well, he just wasn't looking in the right place, and he'll probably never forget this. Take a look at this. It comes to us courtesy of the NFL Network here. Busted coverage, also finding this.
Oh, God.
Boom! Now, truth is, I don't even know who this is, but I feel sorry for this young man, defensive back. In this case, just misruns the drill. But in his own mind, he's like, you know what? I'm not going to get embarrassed by this. I'm not going to let this drill end me here. And he kind of keeps on going, even though he gets rocked in the face.
Yeah, I wish we could see the wide angle of this, because there's a guy back there that's got his hands on his head going, oh
kind of sees it coming.
God. Yeah.
There
guy
you go.
right here off the right of the screen, you can't see him, but he is like, oh boy, he just got knocked.
So you know what? That's our. Yeah.
I will say this. I've been up to the combine. I've been in these situations. There's a million people yelling at you and giving you instructions, and every drill you go to, there's somebody else telling you where to go.
Yeah.
I don't blame this guy at all. I really don't. I know it looks funny, but I'm telling you right now, there's people you don't know. You don't know anybody at the combine on your own teammates, and there's people telling you which direction to go. Probably somebody said it's going to come from that way, and it didn't. Just so happened the guy made a good throw.
All right. So in our comment section, by the way, Shannon Burgess says that's a big old ouch. Yeah, it is for that young man for sure. But it's the embarrassment you almost feel worse for him, because of the combine, you're on TV, you're trying to make yourself some money. But hopefully he goes on to enjoy a terrific professional career. Anyway, we're back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. In the meantime, on the podcast up for you can check that out. Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Thanks for checking us out on Facebook Live. Share the show on really both venues. And let folks know we're talking about the SEC here each and every afternoon on SEC Country Live. We'll see you again tomorrow. Y'all have a great day.